This is the state's case against Gypsy Rose Blanchard.
She's got paraplegia, epilepsy, heart murmurs, and she's allergic to sugar. Everything I do for her.
My mom is my best friend. All she wants to do is keep me safe. Gypsy!
Have you been able to confirm the girl's medical history?
Which part?
Any of it.
I just want to watch this movie now!
Where do you cash giant checks? Welcome to Cordkillers, the show about watching the stuff you love when you want, where you want, however you want. I'm Tom Merritt.
Hey, I'm Brian Brushwood. More importantly, Bryce Castillo. What was that opening that we just saw?
That was a trailer for Hulu's upcoming true crime anthology series called The Act. This first season is about Gypsy Blanchard and the murder of her overprotective, fraudulent mother. That's March 20th.
Okay, so
the medical history was not referring to the mother then.
Correct.
Because she dies.
She does die. Yes, spoiler alert.
But real names, real story, not inspired by true events?
Yeah,
wow.
I went and read the Wikipedia after seeing that trailer. Because
holy cow, because that's terrifying, right? What's it called? Something Munchausen's
syndrome, yeah.
Yeah, it's, I saw The Sixth Sense.
That's right.
I think I know science.
Got it.
Hey, Tom, what's going on in your world?
Yes, Dr. Brushwood. Let's move on to the primary target. You know why?
Why? Is it something real boring? A big yawner of a ho-hum court-killing story?
We got mogul fight. That's right. Two big moguls going at it. We're going to see which one's got the bigger stack of mogulness.
Man, I just wish we had two Unlimiteds. Get ready for this.
IndieWire reports that Steven Spielberg is leading, I'll call it a cadre of people who want to push for a rule change in the Academy Awards to get movies from streaming services like Netflix classified as television and pushed out of the Oscars and into the Emmys. This is the board of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences that Spielberg is a member of. He's going to try to push for that. Let's change the rules. Let's change the rules. I imagine Steven Spielberg might start chanting in this board meeting. Netflix responded on Twitter saying, "We love cinema. Here are some things we also love. Access for people who can't always afford or live in towns without theaters, letting everyone everywhere enjoy releases at the same time, and giving filmmakers more ways to share art. These things are not mutually exclusive," wrote Netflix, and then dropped their phone that they had written that tweet on.
There is, and forgive my narcissistic impulse to make this about me, but it is shocking to me how similar this face-off is with what I've had to deal with the magic community with Scam School, now Scam Nation. There are some pockets of magicians who still to this day regard any teaching of magic for free on the internet as exposure, something that in their view cheapens the art and takes something away from working professionals. I would rephrase that in terms of no, it refuses to participate in your cartel and your protectionist racket. I'm sure it would be very convenient for you, theoretical straw man, if nobody knew anything about magic and you were the only person who knew that cards could be marked or whatever. This feels like Spielberg is being one of the bad guys. He's saying you need to enjoy this piece, this thing, the way I enjoy this thing. And it's really inconvenient that you're democratizing this art and creating so much competition. And to which I agree, Mr. Spielberg / straw man magician from my previous example. I'll bet it's really inconvenient that there's so much competition that's going to be swooping in. However, as I'm fond of telling straw man magicians when I argue with them before I go to sleep, I love magic more than I love you. And so likewise, I love cinema more than I love Steven Spielberg. And likewise, I agree, man. It's probably real inconvenient that there's so much competition. Good luck with that. The good news is that there'll be a flight to quality as a result of it.
I'm going to invite Ava DuVernay into the conversation.
Who's that?
Okay. She's the director of Selma and many other great movies. She's probably not here, so she's not going to join us directly. But if I may, on her behalf, say she has been tweeting, "Hey, Mr. Spielberg, not all of us filmmakers get to be in that meeting. I hope that you will represent our perspective that Netflix is an important way to distribute our films." And one of the things she points out is Selma still hasn't been distributed worldwide. Critically acclaimed movie still hasn't been distributed worldwide, whereas her movie 13 that she did for Netflix is now available in 190 countries like that. And so there's an argument of, okay, I get what you're saying, Mr. Spielberg, that movies are better when they're in the theater, and that is a different thing than watching them at home. And you want to formalize that in the Oscars. And you're saying Netflix allowing Roma in the theaters for a couple weeks, that's just trying to get around the rules. We need to have stronger rules about this. But what should those rules be? Because if you require a 90-day window to win an Oscar, you just eliminated a huge number of indie films from competing that get nominations. You just really ruined the documentary category, which you're going to have to make an exception for, because documentaries just don't get those kinds of windows usually unless they're super lucky. So there's no This reminds me of Brexit, where they're like, how do you fix the Irish backstop? I don't know, but it needs to be fixed. This is Spielberg we need to stop Netflix from working around all this stuff. How do you do that? I don't know, but it needs to be fixed. Well, my take is that Netflix has hacked the system, if I may coin a phrase, Brian, meant to allow indie filmmakers to compete for Best Picture, so they don't have a requirement for the 90-day window, because they're like, hey, we want as many of these indie filmmakers in the tent as possible. And Spielberg and other big directors don't like that Netflix is a big guy using the procedure set aside for the little guy to get into their award show.
Well, it's...
I would call Netflix the modern rogue operator in this system.
So, or let me give you a fictitious scenario. Let's say that there was an award show that was basically a popularity contest, and you could vote once per day, but the website was really tedious and hard to get through. And if one team, maybe, one group of people that had a platform maybe made it very easy to parse, then they would have a tactical advantage, and some might think that's unfair. So that's what Netflix is doing. But here's the important part, Tom. You might be tempted to think that him saying that the cinema experience is unique and special, you might think that that's just a disingenuous grab to excuse what is clearly a protectionist move. But that that's not how he feels. You know that he actually does mean it, because I assume, correct me if I'm wrong here, the next words out of his mouth were, and that's why we need to ban all DVD screeners of Oscar-nominated movies, because it truly is about the specialness.
Vote on them if you're watching them at home.
I mean, unless that's not right. Is that not right?
Hold on, I'm getting a call.
Surely he must have said
Steven
that.
Spielberg's ghost.
Yeah.
No, that's not right. They do prefer you to go into the theater to watch it, and they make screenings available in theaters for the voting members of all these award shows, not just the Oscars. This is true of SAG-AFTRA awards. This is true of all kinds of awards. But they do provide the screeners, don't they? Because they know not everybody can make it, and they'd rather have them see it to vote on it than not see it.
Can't have it both ways. If you want to be perceived as having a genuinely principled stand, and maybe there is one to be made there, then you can't have it both ways. And he most certainly sounds like he's trying to have it both ways. Also, the winners in Steven Spielberg's pitch universe is anybody already established in the current Hollywood ecosystem. Right. The losers include diversity of talent and the art itself. All arts are benefited by increased competitions, whether it's stand-up comedy, whether it's rock music. It was the proliferation of cheap guitars in the 1950s that gave rise to Led Zeppelin and all of the rock revolution of the 60s. It's the democratization, and yes, a bunch of people are going to go out and be bad and fail. That's great. Every failure subsidizes the quality of art that does make it to the top of that tournament. And any move that reduces the number of players, any move that disqualifies somebody from outside the system bringing their art to the table is in my opinion, whether we're talking about teaching magic tricks, whether we're talking about the Oscars, you name it, all of it is a protectionist cartel racket, and I do not approve. And the art does not get better for that happening.
I've always wondered if a TV movie, like a made-for-TV movie that would normally go into the Emmys, was so good, should it be in the Oscars? Like, could there be a situation where a made-for-TV movie just happened to be so good that's like, you know what, this is good enough to win an Oscar? Because the sort of hidden implication has always been, well, if the movie was made for TV, didn't have the budget, didn't have the actors, just wouldn't be as good. So that's a separate category. And that's why Netflix is saying, hey, no, we don't want to be an Emmy because we're not a made-for-TV movie sometimes, although we do have those. We have Roma. We have movies that are just as good as the other nominees for Best Picture, and we deserve to be in there. And every time I try to run an experiment, a thought experiment about like, okay, but what if you did it this way? I run into problems because if it's, all right, we don't want to get rid of indie filmmakers, so we'll just make it Best Picture. And we know that means a lot of indie filmmakers won't be Best Picture nominees, but at least it'll limit the fallout. Well, but then what about cinematography? So Netflix could win cinematography, but not Best Picture? That doesn't make any sense.
So,
or if you say if a production company derives most of its content as television shows, then they don't count. Like, well, I mean, how do you define Disney out of that equation? How do you define Sony out of it? They all make television shows. The only thing that distinguishes Netflix is that they don't want to release their movies exclusively in the theater. They had big independent theater runs for several of their movies, not just Roma this year. Because the indie theaters were like, yeah, great. We don't care if it's on Netflix or not. We'll show it. If people show up and pay, then we make money, and that's great. We're not trying to preserve some business model. We're just trying to stay afloat. We're trying to stay in business. All we care about is film, at least in some of those cases. And so Netflix is trying to say, actually, the theaters that care more about film are showing our movies, whether we have them available on day one or not. It's the big chains that are the ones who are causing this artificial window and causing this strife.
There is a very simple and I think very fair solution that makes all sides, I believe, satisfied. If Steven Spielberg has a problem with the disruptive influence of Netflix, then remember that the Academy is a closed organization. There is a finite number of people who participate in the voting. He can spend his own money to campaign to them directly, saying #never Netflix. Say, look, these are the legitimate reasons that I believe Netflix is damaging our business. We need to band together as a community of actors and directors and special effects artists and prevent them from ruining it. So please sign this thing, take this pledge that you'll never vote for Netflix, whatever. That is totally fair and above board. Changing the rules is not cool. And again, I'm not just saying that because the Podcast Awards changed the rules based on our incredible community rallying to get us a lot of wins.
No, I'll be honest. There's nothing wrong with changing the rules if you're just realizing, hey, things have changed, right? Like if there had been a rule that you had to have your movie on 16 millimeter and somebody's like, yeah, but we invented 32 millimeter. Well, yeah, change the rule, right? Let's make sure that the rule isn't keeping out quality stuff, but they should all be devoted towards the best stuff gets considered. And not changing the rule to exclude a person because, well, we don't like that they don't exclusively allow these in theaters. And I mean, the other thing I think that's interesting is you've got a Martin Scorsese film coming out with Harvey Keitel and Robert De Niro that is definitely going to be at least considered for Academy Award nomination. And I think that's part of this too. Franklin Leonard says this in the Variety article. His tweet is included in a Variety article. It isn't even about Netflix, though. They're the most visible and least sympathetic target. It's about every other film and filmmaker who will struggle to get access to the resources necessary to make a film, but not get those allowing for a 4-week exclusive theatrical release. So you can't make a rule that tries to rule out Netflix without affecting a bunch of other filmmakers. At least I haven't seen a proposal that does that yet.
Well, and that's why, to me, the answer is don't make it a rule thing, because you're right. You're not going to be able to make a rule fairly. It'll very clearly be just protectionist garbage that doesn't elevate the art. However, I believe that the answer to, bad speech is more speech. And so if he's got a beef, any one people, let's say 12 people, let's say 100 people, then use your pulpit, use your money to talk to other members of your community. That's the other thing. You're trying to change the rules because you don't like what the rest of your clubhouse is picking as their favorite color. No, you don't change the rule and remove that color from the spectrum. What you do is you make a case for your color and not theirs.
Yeah, one thing I hadn't even thought of till we were talking here. The rule change is not saying we need to change the rules because the films being nominated by my fellow Academy members aren't up to snuff, because it's not about the movies. It's about the viewers. They're saying these movies are not being shown to people in the right way. Well, what does that have to do with whether a movie is best picture or has best cinematography? Agreed. Those are independent judgments that you are all making based on your experience of the movie. Go see it in a theater. If Roma is distributed on Netflix and you go to the theater and go, well, I could see why this would be good on a TV screen, but it's not great in the theater, then you don't vote for it, like you're saying. But making a rule that says the way it's being shown should eliminate it from consideration doesn't seem to be playing by the point of the award, which is, we're saying objectively for each person, or I guess subjectively for each person, is this the best cinematography? Is this the best writing? Is this the best? And it shouldn't matter whether someone else watches it in some other way. That shouldn't affect your vote.
So how long, let's place bets here. How long until Netflix announces that they're opening 20 theaters nationwide? And that,
well, we talked about that before, didn't we? They looked at buying some theater chains, or I think it was Landmark Theater they were thinking about, right?
Right. Well, and all of them are like, hey, we're just going to make sure that every movie we ever do will be out 2 weeks ahead of time at special Netflix branded theaters. And then, the only reason I can see against them doing that is that it gives the Academy power to change the rule and say, well, now it's got to be 29 days. Now it's got to be 42 days or whatever.
I mean, that right now, what Netflix did this year was voluntarily release Roma and a couple other movies with extended theatrical exclusives, which they'd never done before, just to be like, hey, we're going to try to meet you in the middle. OK, we think everybody should be able to access a movie on the same day, no matter how they're accessing it. But we know some of you guys that get your nose bent out of shape. So we'll do 2 weeks. And essentially what Spielberg is saying is not good enough, damn it, not good enough.
Well, and again, I can't think of a worse spokesman for this. This is not somebody speaking truth to power. This is the man. This is the establishment. This is a guy whose entire career was built on defining mega blockbuster success based on scarcity during a very specific time window. That's an artifact of the way school systems are set up in the United States. Like, look, I'm sure your movies are fine, Mr. Spielberg. They're great. You're very talented. But let's not pretend that you weren't helped very, very much by a certain set of structures. And now, as you fight to protect those structures, looks an awful lot like somebody in power demanding that everything stay the same because those rules benefit him so well over the last 40 years.
And I'll be honest, like, is Roma not as good of a movie because it was on Netflix? Is that what Steven Spielberg is saying? Is this movie is not good enough to be considered for Best Picture because it was on a streaming platform?
This is why this will go nowhere, is because he can't say that. He can't attack the art on any of this. So instead, he has to speak in vague terms about protecting the integrity of whatever this magic sauce is or whatever. What he's really saying between the lines is, really dig our protectionist cartel. Could we not rock that boat? Could we have less democracy here, please?
The one thing I'll give him is he says, look, I have no problem with streaming. I'm doing streaming projects for Apple. It's not like I'm against the business model. He wants to make money off that too. It's just that I think you're definitely right that there's an element of I want to keep things working the way they work for me. and he's worried about that being undermined. I also think there's a legitimate just old man, like, this is the way it's always been. And it's great. I grew up in the era where we all got together in the dark room with the flickering cinema. And if that dies, by gosh, we've lost something in our culture. And I don't disagree with him, but I don't think trying to eliminate Netflix from the Academy Awards is the way to save that.
It does strike me. It's a very odd choice for a mouthpiece for this. Like, I can't think of too many people worse than Steven Spielberg to be the one standing out and screaming this, because it's a bad look. He doesn't need it. He's fine no matter what. I mean,
yeah.
Find somebody disenfranchised and say, get their story of how I only made it because I worked within the structures, the very rigorous, very difficult structures of the Academy system, and my movie ended up being Best Picture nominee or whatever. Here's all the things that happened as a result of that system. Let's please not screw up that system. I think that's a story that could take root, but having Steven Spielberg say "woe is me," it's a bit like how bad of a mouthpiece Metallica was for anti-piracy. They made their whole money on bootleg tapes getting circulated, and that's how everybody discovered Master of Puppets. And so they're going to be the ones telling everybody to stop pirating. I think likewise, Spielberg is as poor of a centerpiece.
And I'll add to that, like, he's not even doing a public campaign. He's like, I need to be allowed to go into this closed room with all of these self-selected individuals who won't let anyone else in for the debate and convince them to do what I want, right? It's not even a public debate. So I don't know. I think the Variety article, which has a lot of tweets and quotes from independent filmmakers, is really telling as far as, like, this is why it's Steven Spielberg making this argument and not someone like you're describing, Brian.
Because they couldn't find anybody who would be an appropriate narrator.
All the people that fit the description you just gave are all like, no, Netflix has been pretty great at making it easier for me to make films and have people see them. And what I want to do when I make a film is have people see them. So,
and won't it be interesting to look at the infographics 10, 15 years from now when we see how many first-time filmmakers got their big break because of Netflix and what wonderful stuff they go on to create that's universally beloved.
Yeah. I just don't understand. Well, I do understand. I just don't think this is going to work. And I actually hope it doesn't work. I guess the big fear is Spielberg convinces the people in that room somehow that,
also, I'm so over the Oscars. A bunch of actors voting for themselves about how important acting is.
But it's not actors. It's producers,
whatever,
directors,
Hollywood,
cinematographers. It's all the people who work in the industry voting for the things they think are the best.
I'm still working on my pitch for Hollywood. It's super the best. The movie. It's in it. All problems get solved by Hollywood. I expect it to win all the Oscars.
I am sympathetic to what you're saying, except it is the movie industry, and the people who are involved in voting for the Oscars are the people who work in the movie industry. So if there was a time when that's okay, this would be it.
Sure. Well, and I suppose to use my own logic against me, then Brian, instead of saying stop caring about the Oscars, what you should be doing is tell more people to support the Golden Globes. It's the people's choice or whatever.
Well, but that's even more shadowy because it's the Hollywood Foreign Press.
Whatever. But the point is
the People's Choice Awards.
If I was being fair, then I would be I would be taking my own advice. In other words.
Yeah. Gotcha. All right. Well, if you want to take our advice, you should take our advice and back us on Patreon. Patreon.com/Cordkillers is the only way that we support this show. You don't have to go and wait 90 days. We give the show to you right there at Patreon.com/Cordkillers.
Heck yeah. Although we do make you wait 48 whole hours for spoiler in time, and you don't even get to hear after talk unless you're a patron. So head on over to patreon.com/Cordkillers. Get to enjoy so much more, all in your very own RSS feed. Thank you guys for keeping us loud, live, and independent for the longest incarnation of this show we've ever done.
Yeah. In fact, we plan to celebrate that shortly with a special episode where I'm traveling to Austin, Texas, just to sit down with Brian Brushwood.
Yeah, you know what? You know what's really messed up is I know you don't like it when I talk about our private conversations live on the air, Tom, but I remember when you called openly weeping the other day, and you were saying, Brian, I just wish we could do something special. I want to be there live and in person. I want to go to South by So Wasted, your comedy event coming up at South by Southwest on March 9th. And he said, but I just can't afford it. And I said, Tom, Tom, don't you remember? We have Patreon. We have patrons. We have bosses. And because of that, we have money and we could fly you out. And then you just openly sobbed and wept. It was very moving.
Yeah,
I gave it the Best Picture award.
Wish I'd been there. But I will be there in Austin, Texas, thanks to you, in part, at patreon.com/Cordkillers. So keep the support coming. We appreciate it more than you could possibly know. All right.
Also,
Let's talk about how to watch.
Real quick general reminder. Tomorrow, as we're recording this, it is March 4th. Tomorrow is the 5th. We're going to be doing the movie draft. The summer movie draft is happening tomorrow on Night Attack.
Twitch.tv/Night Attack. All right. Now, how to watch. Well, folks, how you watch HBO might be changing soon. AT&T sent a memo out to Warner Media employees. If you hadn't been tracking that, AT&T owns Warner Media now, outlining some changes. Richard Plepler, who's worked for HBO for 28 years, has been the head of HBO, is not going to be anymore. He's leaving. David Levy, president of Turner Broadcasting, the folks over CNN and TBS and TNT, he's out too. He's resigning. Former NBC executive Robert Greenblatt is being brought in. He'll oversee HBO, TNT, TBS, True TV, and the upcoming streaming service that Warner Media is creating at the behest of AT&T. Remember, AT&T came out and said, we just need you to make more stuff. And Richard Plepler was like, except that we focus on quality. And AT&T standing right next to him like, more quality. And then I guess later that day, Richard Plepler said, you know what, I'm probably going to resign around March. And that's what's happening. CNN's Jeff Zucker is going to take over sports in addition to news. So a lot of the NBA stuff that's done on TNT will be under him, as well as CNN. Kevin Tsujihara will continue to run Warner Brothers Hollywood and TV studios. They'll also add a kids and young adult group, as well as consumer product licensing under him. Recode's Peter Kafta says this is all because AT&T wants to run Turner and HBO as one business. And HBO under Plepler prided itself on being independent. Everything that was on HBO was HBO's. And when it was on HBO, it was just on HBO. You couldn't go watch Game of Thrones anywhere else. You had to get HBO. Well, that might change. Kafka, says if they wanted to, they could take previous seasons of Game of Thrones and run them on TNT as a promo to get people excited about what's coming back to HBO. And that seems to be where AT&T is going with this, to provide a streaming service in addition to its existing network deals with cable companies, where you can just say, I want to pay for all the Warner Media stuff, my NBA, my Conan O'Brien, and my Game of Thrones, all in one streaming service.
So historically, this kind of play works very, very well in the short term and almost universally hollows out the brand and discards the husk at the end of it. Cadillac used to be a brand that was synonymous with success, highest end, quality. And then they realized, oh my God, everybody in the world wants a Cadillac. People are singing songs about how they want a Cadillac. What if we made a cheap version of a Cadillac? In the short term, did great. All of a sudden, people who couldn't afford a Cadillac got a Cadillac. That worked for a while until the word Cadillac ceased to mean exclusive, the best of the best. Only some people can get it because it meant something. You can't play it both ways. It's not the super expensive, also really affordable car that works really great, except for when it's always busted. What happens is you end up at the mushy middle and a brand breaks. Now, having said all that, there's nothing holy or sacred about a brand. Yeah, we all grew up watching HBO become one of the greatest, most powerful brands in the business. AT&T bought the brand, they bought the business, and maybe what they want to do, maybe what they should do to benefit their shareholders is dismantle it for parts. And a good way to do that is to carve things out and engage in this short-term strategy of synergies and all of a sudden HBO is the special place where only a few amazing shows live, except for now they're everywhere. And then one day you look up and you're like, oh wait, there's nothing great about HBO. There's nothing special about it anymore. Maybe financially, that's the right decision to get their money back out of it. But here's the other good news. Part of you is going to be sad and nostalgic. Remember that the magic is in the talent, not in the letters HBO. The talent will go off and do other things. Look at how much great stuff happened to the majority of the cast of Firefly after they went off to do other things. Maybe we'll see a similar diaspora from HBO, and it's fine either way. So don't get overly emotional. Nobody's taking anything away from you. It's just, I don't know, and possibly this might be the kind of creative destruction that leads to something wonderful.
I 100% agree with you. And I desperately have an irrational attachment to HBO because it was one of the first cable channels I ever saw. And I like the idea of, but I know if it's from HBO, it's a certain level of quality. That's just a nice shortcut to have in your life, right?
Sure.
But I also know that Netflix doesn't have an HBO. It has Netflix. And it says, whatever we think you want to watch, that's what we'll suggest to you, whether it's HBO level stuff, which we have, or whether it's like silly sitcoms, which they also have. They pretty much have everything. And it's smart for Warner Media to look at that and say, gosh, a theoretical, differently named service to compete with Netflix that can provide Conan O'Brien and all the TBS comedies and Game of Thrones and Sopranos and NBA basketball, which Netflix doesn't have that, do they? That's a pretty compelling competitive advantage. And forget all this stuff about linear TV streaming, having Game of Thrones on TNT. That's all rear guard action anyway. The future is in these streaming packages. And so this may actually be the smartest move Warner Media could make. The only question for me is whether Robert Greenblatt's the guy for that job or not. And I have no idea what the answer to that is.
And I got to tell you, man, I feel you when it's like, it will bum me out that for 30 years, HBO has gone against the grain to redefine. I mean, their whole slogan, it's not TV, it's HBO. They're like, no, we stand apart. We are special. We are something different from whatever you've seen before. And then FX following in those same footsteps, trying to do the exact same thing. Yeah, it'll be a slight bummer that HBO will now be kind of an eye-rolling punchline, but whatever. They're all working for the phone company now anyway. Who's gonna put all their beautiful song of the world for in the hands of AT&T? It's like they're already in trouble. They're on a bad track to begin with.
What usually happens with these situations too, and I don't know if this will continue to happen, but the media portion takes over the brand image, right? When we think of Disney now, on this show anyway, we don't think of Donald Duck and a theme park. We think of Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, I should have said Mickey Mouse, a theme park, and ABC, ESPN, Disney XD, right? Like it's
Marvel,
a media company.
Star Wars.
Sony is the same thing. With Sony Pictures, you're like, oh, Sony Pictures. That's not the Walkman company. That they're owned by the same people, but that's a whole different thing that I understand. And so, it's quite possible that AT&T stops being thought of as the phone company, and they're like, oh, those are the people that own the Warner thing, or whatever they end up calling it. And maybe they can keep HBO as a stamp of quality. Maybe they can still sell HBO Now standalone for people who just want that. They obviously have lots of deals where it's an add-on to things like Prime Video and Hulu. And so maybe the idea of, hey, we've got our Turner streaming service with HBO built in. You have to pay extra to get it for everywhere else you go, but here you get all that quality. Maybe some of that can survive. I don't know.
I doubt it. But again, two things. If I'm really predicting, I'm going to say HBO's brand is significantly tarnished in 3 to 5 years. Also, if you care about that, then you need to question your life choices and your values. You shouldn't care about three letters.
I don't know. I mean, I care about it, but if you care about that so much that it ruins your day, then yeah.
Yeah.
If you care about it more than like, oh, that's too bad. Oh, well.
you should only care about it if you're a stockholder in HBO, in which case you're already happy because AT&T bought your HBO.
Right, because you're a stockholder in AT&T now.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about what to watch. That's why we do all this stuff in Under Surveillance.
I like this, Jay. It's all about location. Under surveillance.
There's a college humor kind of situation going on with a horror series coming to Netflix March 7th. So by the time you listen to it, it might be already out. It in the trailer bills itself as a straight teen horror, like college teen, maybe 20-somethings, college age horror series. But according to The Verge, a couple episodes in, it starts to get silly and absurdist, and then it goes back to being serious. I'm curious if this is going to be kind of a cult hit or a flop.
I'll tell you what, I always think of the teacher who on day one of high school, a teacher could always start off stern and serious and then get loose later, but and become your favorite teacher. They could never start off cool and then earn your trust and respect. So maybe that, I don't know, maybe that's a smart move on their part.
There's also a French show called Osmosis coming to Netflix March 29th. That's Brexit Day, by the way, unless they delay it. About the perils of AI date matching. So it's kind of like Black Mirror series, essentially.
This
in
sounds
France.
Awesome. Like, I am so fascinated. So I'm in the middle of rereading The Stand, and the character, Glenn Bateman, I think he says, give me 2 people and they'll fall in love. Give me 3 people and there'll be a fight. You know, give me 4 people, there'll be a society, blah, blah, blah. He reduces everything to these simple biological heuristics. And I'm so fascinated to wonder how programmable our wetware is. And I love any art that explores the idea, like what would the difference be between finding the right match and then versus being matched with anybody and given a drug to cause that person to feel
the right match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Fundamentally, ethically, is there any difference between the two?
It has come to my attention that I did not name the horror series that we were talking about just moments ago. It's called The Order.
The Order.
If you're looking for it, The Order. Prime Video released a trailer for season 2 of The Tick, arriving April 5th. If you liked season 1, which I never finished, even though I kind of liked it, it looks like more of the same in better, maybe? I don't know. Bryce, you were watching this, right?
No, I watched the Amazon pilot, and then...
You just watched the pilot? You never watched the rest of it? Huh?
Yeah, and I did not like the pilot at all. So I don't. Brian, did you watch? Because I think you liked the pilot.
Oh, maybe
Tried. I watched, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes of the pilot. Yeah. And I mean, to be honest, even them putting their best foot forward on the trailers didn't really do it for me. And I'm predisposed to want the Tick to win and do well, but I just wasn't feeling it.
It always just felt a little off, a little too awkward. Like,
yeah,
if it was fine-tuned just a little bit more, it would hit better.
Comedy timing matters, right?
And delivery and look, the suit that he had, and that was the pilot, so it looked even worse. But
I agree. There was always something about the episodes I watched that felt like they were really close to doing the Tick.
Yeah, there was a lot of, like, the thought that I kept having was like, well, that was almost.
Yeah.
That was almost.
X-Men Dark Phoenix has a new trailer out. The movie arrives June 7th this year. It is pretty much the same Jean Grey storyline from X-Men Last Stand, but because of the Days of Future Past movie, that timeline's gone, so they get to tell the story again with different actors.
That's pretty smart. I'm down for it. And I like the fact that, imagine 20 years ago, somebody pitching this as an idea, like, you expect consumers to just go along and understand all of this complicated sci-fi mumbo jumbo. And the fact that we live in the world where, we do. We get it. It's pretty great.
I've seen a lot of people say this will probably be the last X-Men movie in this incarnation. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, I'd be curious where they go now that we live in a world where Disney's going to own Fox.
Yep.
I think we're all wondering that. Finally, CBS confirmed that Star Trek Discovery will get a 3rd season. And Alex Kurtzman, who... Oh, boy, so Brian Fuller was on it, and then he left before it started production. Then they had 2 people on season 1 who got accused of being like aggressive and abusive, so they got kicked off early in season 2. And Kurtzman came in and took over season 2, and then midway through season 2, Michelle Paradise joined, and now Michelle Paradise is going to be like full-on showrunner. Kurtzman is still listed as a producer with her, but kind of the vibe is that Kurtzman won't have to be in the day-to-day as much with Michelle there. So we're getting maybe finally the show-running staff of Star Trek Discovery settling down and a 3rd season.
So here is the good news, is that I think when you talk to most people, what they know about Star Trek Discovery is they know that's that thing behind the paywall and that it looks pretty good and that they mean to get around to watching it. And if that's the case, let that sentiment simmer, let it get really good, seasons 3 and 4, and then you're fine. Now, all of a sudden, you have a different narrative where, like, hey, that thing you've been hearing about for half a decade, the thing that everybody's talking about, how it's the best Star Trek anything right now, you can jump in today and binge everything in the next 2 months. And that's going to be a very, very strong USP for CBS.
My shortcut in thinking about Star Trek series throughout the 90s was their shaky season 1, have real bad episodes in season 2, and finally kind of find their rhythm in season 3. So if Discovery is just following in those footsteps, then this is good. This is a good thing. And yeah, maybe CBS All Access, which as we mentioned on previous shows is hitting its numbers, will just hit more and more numbers.
And then some.
It's because they're going to add more Star Trek shows. They're going to add the Picard show. They're going to add more shows like The Twilight Zone and other properties. So it's not just for Star Trek fans. It's already got The Good Fight, which is apparently very well loved by fans of The Good Wife, which is a spinoff from.
Once you divorce yourself from the right nowness of this story, and traditionally, when it comes to network television, it's very much the story of what's happening right this minute. Once you take a 1,000-foot view and you think in terms of evergreen content and ecosystems that people are going to fall into and stay and remain happy in, all of a sudden this becomes a 5-year play, a 10-year play, and it's fine that they're having ups and downs and a lot of turnover as long as they get to that place where everybody's stoked about seasons 3, 4, 5.
I just wonder if Fox owns the Orville. I just had a thought. Or could CBS, once that's run its course, buy the back catalog and put it on All Access?
Of Orville?
Yeah.
Oh, wild. So then all of a sudden...
Does CBS produce it?
No, I don't know who produces it. That Fox may produce it for itself, in which case this thought is.
But the idea being that if you're courting a specific ecosystem, you could bring people in. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it probably is going to end up on Hulu because Disney will own Fox and Hulu, and that's all fine. All right, let's talk about what we have our eyes on, Brian.
Yes, indeed. We watched Office Season 1, Episode 1 of the UK version, and True Detective. We both got caught up to what, Episode 5?
Yes, that's right.
Excellent. I started last night watching, what was it, Leaving Neverland? Is that the name of it? The documentary? I only made it about halfway through, but hoo boy, is that some painful, compelling, interesting stuff. I also started watching Umbrella Academy on behalf of everybody who's begged me
to watch Umbrella Academy. Okay.
It's bad. It's a bad show. I couldn't finish the first episode. The idea is great. Maybe the story, when they get around to telling it, will be great. The direction is bad. The pacing is bad. The acting is bad. The dancing is bad. The execution is sloppy, and I didn't have a good time watching it.
So not much of a chance for you that you're going to keep watching that one. Sounds like.
Weirdly, Bonnie is now like hate watching. She's up to like episode 4 or 5 or 6.
Really?
So I might just continue to hate watch it, but it's like I keep watching it and I was just like, that was the best take you had, huh? That was the best performance you got out of that actor. Okay.
Have you watched any of the CW shows like the Arrow or Flash?
Like an episode here or there.
Yeah.
I think it does feel like those.
Yeah, I think that's who they're trying to court.
Okay, that makes sense.
The younger superhero cable show crowd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there are stories that are good enough that I can look past poor execution, but so far this isn't so interesting. Like, I don't know, what 10 or 15 minutes into it, when they kept hammering me, this is not a spoiler unless you've never heard a story arc before. They're all like, all the children have superpowers except you. You don't have any superpowers at all. I was like, okay, so she's going to have like the best superpower of all of them. Right. And it's like, you're like, well, just quick reminder, you don't have any superpowers. That's why you wrote a book. Me, the girl with no superpowers. And I was just like, geez, come on. What are you doing, guys? It's didn't care for it.
Now, last week you canceled PlayStation View while we were talking. Am I correct in remembering that?
Yep. And remember, I'm going to say the system works, Tom, because I tell everybody, cancel everything. And the moment you have a need to resume it, then resume it. Yesterday, it was made in no uncertain terms to me clear that we needed PlayStation View, and I have a happy 14-year-old, and we're back on the PlayStation View train.
Well, okay then.
And it was relatively painless. So I'm glad for the experiment, if nothing else.
All right. Well, I know that over the course of the last several months, I've mentioned that my wife and I have been caught up in watching some Chinese and Korean dramas, some of them on Netflix and some of them on the Viki app. And I've mentioned ones that I like and because they're fun or different takes on things or just interesting. This is the first one that I would unreservedly recommend people watch if they like Game of Thrones style stories. It's called Nirvana in Fire. It's a couple years old. It is the first one that we've watched, and it's not been, oh, this is interesting because it's a different take, or wow, that's an interesting visual effects situation they've got. This is, oh my God, 40 minutes have passed? I had no idea. Like, this is over already? We have to watch the next one. It's wuxia, which is a genre of martial arts that's period based. So this is set, I don't know, it's in the Liang dynasty, but that's not even important. It's about a guy who was part of a faction that was framed as rebels, and his father died. He disappeared. They all think he's dead, but his appearance was changed through an accident. So he comes back to the capital to try to manipulate his old friend, who's not in the line of succession but is a prince, into becoming the crown prince. And meantime, there's all these kick-ass princesses and princes who fight each other, and there's all these maneuverings of who's going to actually, be able to get stuff to happen to play the crown prince off against this other prince who wants in. If you like the political stuff of Game of Thrones combined with Chinese martial arts, if that sounds interesting, this is a fantastic show.
Right on.
Nice.
Again, it's called Nirvana in Fire. All right, Bryce, what should we be on the lookout for?
Hey, we got a movie recommendation from Rick. Rick writes, hey guys, I've got a pick for on the lookout. It's Before We Vanish on Hulu. It's a Japanese sci-fi movie about an alien invasion. I normally hate subtitle movies, but I gave this a shot, and the production level is really good. I guess I really like it because it shows how much Japan is like the US, with workplace harassment or public complacency when one of the actors is trying to tell everyone that they're being invaded and more. I've heard Tom talk about Korean and Chinese shows and movies lately, and that's why I gave this one a shot, and it paid off. Cheers, Rick from Plano. Thanks, Rick. This looks pretty interesting. It's an alien possession film, and it looks like there are a lot of like big action sequences and a lot of good fights. I think I'm going to check this out. That's Before We Vanish, and that's streaming on Hulu in the U.S. I'm not quite sure where you can see it outside of the U.S., but
gotcha.
Hulu in the U.S.
Thank you, Rick.
Before we go beyond, I did want to give a quick shout out to if you get the chance to see Breaker Uppers on Netflix, the Taika Waititi, I think is executive producer or whatever. He's not very hands on with it, from what I understand. It is fearless and feminine and funny as hell. I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
If you got something we should be on the lookout for, email us cordkillers@gmail.com. Now, I could tell you about books that I'm writing, TomAirBooks.com. I could tell you about It's a Thing at itsatthing.me, but the biggest thing on my schedule this week is this Saturday, Brian Brushwood.
What?
And I will be in Austin, Texas at the biggest event in world history to happen this Saturday in those 3 hours in Austin, Texas.
Yeah, man. Dude, we've done South by So Wasted as an informal get-together for coming up on half a decade now. This time we're making it a full-fledged show, bringing in the hilarious guys from Ice Cream Social. If you're familiar with Penn Jillette's podcast, then you know Matt Donnelly. You've heard him talking with his buddy Paul Mattingly. They're hilarious and funny. We're going to be doing Night Attack, and of course we got music events, including the Possum Posse dual core, and we're gonna figure out some way to get Modern Rogue live on stage, and Rex and Daniel from the Whiskey Vault are gonna be joining us. It's gonna be a total blast. Head on over to podcastlink.com/nightattack. Just in fact, you could trigger your digital assistant right now and just say podcastlink.com/nightattack. That'll take you straight there. We are now very rapidly approaching single digits of numbers of tickets available. So
nice.
Get yours now.
Yeah, if you are less than 10 people, order your ticket right now. All right, let's move on to the front lines.
Front lines!
Cordcutting.com, which is an excellent website, has started doing its own surveys, its own studies, which is really exciting. And they have one out right now where they used Amazon's Mechanical Turk to survey 1,127 people. Asked them a lot of things, but the thing that got everybody's attention is they asked people about mooching. Every story you see about this will call it piracy. I don't feel comfortable calling it piracy because it's not downloading things. It's I'm logging into someone else's Netflix account. I'm mooching off them, right? You mooch off your family, you mooch off your friends, you mooch off their Netflix accounts. So if everybody who said in this survey that they mooched paid for their own subscription instead, and then of course weighted that out across, the representative sample of the United States, Netflix would bring in an extra $192 million, Amazon $45 million, and Hulu $40 million. The largest age group of people mooching Netflix and Hulu was, you might have guessed, millennials at 18 and 20%, although the other age groups are, pretty close to 20%, so it's kind of evenly split. And interestingly, baby boomers were tops at mooching Prime Video at 19.5%, but again, pretty flat. The best part about this story to me is not in their study or any of the articles that I've seen about this, really. It's the fact that we have on record Richard Plepler from HBO, who I know, not in charge of HBO anymore, but up until this study he was, and Reed Hastings at Netflix saying, nah, yeah, it's fine. I know it's really, technically against our terms of service, but we think it's great that we want to get people addicted to video. And if they try our service, we figure eventually they'll want to pay for it.
Yeah, all of this breaks down once you realize that this is just a marketing expense. No, they don't have to write a check for an advertisement to run, but instead they're giving up lost, air quotes here, lost revenues for to establish a pattern of getting accustomed to being a Netflix kind of person or a Hulu person. Look, man, eventually that couple's going to break up, and then they'll have 2 Hulu accounts instead of just one. Eventually that teenager is going to go to college, and then they'll have 2 Netflix accounts instead of just one. To be honest, if there's any hot take on any of this, I'm just surprised that those numbers are so low. Normally,
yeah, right?
you would have expected them to be much, much higher.
No, I agree. I think this is somewhat of a non-story because this isn't exactly lost money. And what money there is lost where somebody's like, well, I could pay for it. I could just use mom's account. It's going to end up binding them to the point where when mom cancels the account or when mom downgrades to the one stream at a time and they're both trying to watch at the same time and the son or daughter gets frustrated and is like, fine, I'm just going to buy my own. That's when Netflix gets its money.
Yep. Meanwhile, TiVo is preparing to split its company into 2, with one handling the DVRs like the TiVo Bolt and the other licensing intellectual property. TiVo has essentially been up for sale for about a year, and the split is probably meant to make that sale easier. You may recall that Rovi acquired TiVo in 2016 and kept the name for the combined company. Smart move, you think, to carve it out into bits?
Probably. It sounds like they've had interest, but nobody wants all of the company. And so they're dividing it up into we've had people express interest in the intellectual property and we've had people express interest in the device side. I do think this ends up kind of ending TiVo.
Kind of killing it. Yeah. I mean,
I think
it's
obviously the intellectual property is a different thing, but whoever buys the device side probably just wants to acquire those devices and sales channels and talent. And they might keep the TiVo brand alive for a while, but they probably just fold it into other stuff.
Yep.
The New York Post has an article reviving the story we talked about last year that Apple, including CEO Tim Cook, are heavily involved in the content direction of the original TV shows. We talked about
so great, Tom.
Them wanting to be more family friendly. Well, apparently, the Post reports the same stories we heard before of Apple wanting nicer storylines, family friendly storylines, and that creators are getting frustrated. Really, the only difference between this Post story and the one we talked about last year is more creators are listed as being frustrated. And it may mean that the situation hasn't changed over the time since that other story, which would explain the delay in Apple launching this service. If they're like, well, we haven't got it quite right. That's Apple's mode of operations for hardware, right? They keep refining it until they get it right. Then they launch the feature. They may be trying to apply that to their TV shows.
I believe it. Meanwhile, last episode we mentioned how Sling TV now has 2.42 million subs and DirecTV 1.6 million, followed by around 1 million for YouTube and Hulu. Well, Bloomberg sources say Hulu is nearing 2 million for its live TV service, and YouTube has definitely passed 1 million, meaning that they're gaining or passing Sling and DirecTV and seemingly growing while others flatten. I guess I'm both a member of the declining population of PlayStation View and the reclining version of PlayStation View.
Well, yeah, PlayStation View is kind of in the middle here. Where nobody's really sure which direction it's going. But we talked about last week how it seemed like everything is slowing down, except maybe for Hulu, which will be good for Disney. Because Variety says Disney is in active talks to buy out AT&T's 10% stake in Hulu. AT&T has that stake because Warner bought that stake. And then, as we mentioned earlier in the show, AT&T acquired Warner. Disney already owns 30% of Hulu and is about to make that 60% when its acquisition of Fox is completed. Comcast owns the other 30%. However, Comcast has told its investors that it's not interested in selling its stake anytime soon. So this will probably, if they can get AT&T on board, and AT&T wants to pay off some debts, so it sounds like they probably will, Disney will be running Hulu eventually with 70%, and Comcast will be a minority shareholder.
And finally, BritBox is coming to Britain. The service, which combines content from the BBC and ITV, has been available in North America. ITV said it and the BBC are also working to sign on other partners from the UK version of the service, including Channel 4 and 5. It would also include new programming created specifically for the service. The target date for launch would be the second half of 2019. This sounds so counterintuitive on the surface, but the more I think about it, like, yes, of course. So what you do is you take a niche that did not exist, a hunger that needs to be filled. People want Anglophiles outside of England want this content. You do it, you build the gizmo, and then you figure out like, oh wait, there's a lot of people who probably don't love changing channels, who would love DVR capability, who would love to not bother with an aerial or cable subscription or whatever. Then you turn around and you bring it to those folks. I'm really impressed that they're seeing the wisdom of all that.
Well, and the other thing I would add to that is it is easier for these companies to launch in the North American market because not as many rights are tied up.
Right.
You know, they make these shows in Britain and immediately tie up all the rights. Like, okay, you'll show it for this long and then we'll put it on reruns here and then it'll go to this, service. That's easy because you're in Britain. And they're like, ooh, but if we wanted to start a service, we'd have to buy some time to unwind those rights. But you know where we have a bunch of those rights available? North America. Let's launch the service there, try it out for a couple of years, work out the kinks, and then by that time we'll have unwound the deals enough that we can bring it back over to Britain. So yeah, I think it makes perfect sense. All right, let's move on to the dispatches from the front. My watch is telling me I should go for a brisk 14-minute walk, but screw it. I'm going to stay here with you guys and read your emails. Mikey C says, hi, I am legally blind, but I still like to watch TV and movies with my wife. I was wondering if there is a device or streaming service combo that would allow me to wear headphones to listen to descriptive technology while my wife just watches TV normally. The theaters have this, and it allows me to enjoy movies with her there, and I would love to replicate that at home.
So I know that almost all Netflix originals have descriptive audio. So I would say certainly for anything on Netflix, as long as you don't mind having two accounts, the two of you could just get set up and
sync them up.
And to be honest, that's kind of one of my favorite little games is when I'll ask somebody over the phone, like, hey, watch this video. And then they'll play it. And then I'll do that game of like play, pause until the video I'm seeing muted matches up with the audio that I'm hearing over there. So as long as you don't mind that little dance, I think you'll be able to have that experience.
And I think there are services or tools out there that'll let you sync your Netflix with each other. Not the shared watching thing like a Rabbit where everyone's watching the same encode, but I think that there are some out there that will let you both watch at the same time, but on your own accounts.
I would
just check that out.
I wonder if there's some version, kind of like a RiffTrax companion MP3, where people just do audio descriptions to go along with stuff. But then that's something you would probably know more about than I do, Mikey. But
yeah, and then I'm trying to think like, oh, there's the Roku thing where you can plug in a headphone but then you still have the problem with your wife wouldn't be able to hear the regular audio. So yeah, I throw this out to the audience as well. These are some good suggestions, but if you can help Mikey C out, cordkillers@gmail.com.
And meanwhile, Steve writes us saying that he's our lesser boss. It's like, hey man, no. You're a boss.
Yeah.
If you're a boss at any level, you're our boss. He says the chicken challenge is still alive. I get internet only from Spectrum. I have 200 megabits for $79. Spectrum offers new customers in my neighborhood 400 megabits for $69. I called and told him if he couldn't give me the new customer price and speed, I would look elsewhere for internet. It was a PITA. Wait, what is that short for?
I think he said
pain in the ass.
I was a pain in the
He said it was a pain in the ass, but I got 400 megabits for $70.99. So $1 more than the new user price, but it still doubled my internet speed and took $9 a month off the bill. If you have already cut the TV cable, you can still play the chicken challenge. Good deal.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah. And then a different Steve S. Says, you guys spoke about usually, other than the Super Bowl, which I boycott, not thinking of the production value and content of ads on streams or broadcasts or etc. I'm way older than you kids. Did you know that John Lennon once spoke about how much he liked TV adverts? He said, think about it. Look what they spend on 1 minute of production and multiply that by 2 hours worth. They spend way more than is spent on TV or movies generally, so they'd better be effing good. Fun thought. I agree, Steve. That is a fun thought.
That is a true fact. And as another example, Ken Nordine is a spoken word poet who's since passed away, but in the 1960s, I believe, he did a series of 1 minute beat poetry based on colors. And it was a series of ads for a paint company. And, so he did a little 1 minute poem about yellow and another one about green or maroon or olive. And then he released it as an album. And that is an album of advertisements that were made entirely mercenary. And it is one of my favorite spoken word albums ever. If you have the chance, hop online and check out Ken Nordine Colors.
Excellent.
And Andrew Littler says, as for ads, the only ads I see are on YouTube, and their lack of variety is maddening. I signed up with Namecheap.com. I got nothing but Namecheap and GoDaddy ads for weeks straight.
That's the worst.
Then I tried NordVPN for my dad. I got nothing but VPN ads. Now I'm enjoying a good dozen Squarespace ads before I get Wix or something. I've disliked ads before, but I've never hated a company because of them until lately. This truly is the darkest timelines. Hey man, not if you sign up for YouTube Premium. Best decision I've made.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, like this is an example of what I talk about all the time, which I think there are people who just ideologically like, I hate ads. I don't care if I know it's an ad, I hate it. But I think most people don't hate ads. They hate ads that aren't appropriate. And I define that as an ad you don't like watching is not appropriate, right? If you like watching trailers because you like movies, you're watching ads, but you think they're appropriate. If you say, yeah, but I see these Namecheap ads and I already signed up for Namecheap, I'm like, yeah, those aren't appropriate. They shouldn't be advertising to you when you already bought their product. That's just a failure in the advertising system. I think the best ads are the ones where we go, oh, well, that's interesting. I hadn't heard about that, right? Or beat poetry ads where you're like, wow, that's really cool. I like that. I want to find out more about that. And advertising just isn't as good as we tend to want to give it credit for sometimes, I think.
Agreed.
All right, folks, our website is cordkillers.com. Our email address is cordkillers@gmail.com. We're live on twitch.tv/Night Attack, which is also carried on diamondclub.tv Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific. Again, special episode coming your way next week. Brian and I are going to reflect on the history of cord cutting. It's been around enough that it has a history now. We'll talk to you then.
Hey guys, Brian and Tom here, and it's just the same old message at the end of the credits, just like always.
That's right, Brian. Nothing new here except your name showing up.
Oh my gosh,
because
I've got a name.
You just supported us on Patreon.
Yeah, all those $5 donors. Look at that. That's your name in pixels. We're gonna make you famous, kid. Put your name in pixels on the internet.
There's some names in there, but some of you are new. Some of you aren't there. It's sad. What can they do, Brian?
I mean, they could go to patreon.com/cordkillers and pledge $5 an episode and be one of these amazing people, like this one.
Amazing.
Oh, look at that name right there.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.